Hello students, this is Mr. Martirone and this is our unit on the Age of Exploration. As I am teaching today's lecture and discussion, you guys should have out your Cornell notes sheet that looks like this, entitled The Age of Exploration. And today's discussion, I'm going to talk to you guys about the causes of exploration. I'm going to talk to you guys about the early explorers, including Marco Polo. I'm going to talk to you about the search for spices. I'm going to talk to you about some of the new technologies, and I'm going to talk to you about the country that actually led the way for exploration, which was the country of Portugal. All right, Age of Exploration. Well, we haven't really left the Renaissance. The Age of Exploration is happening at the same time as the Renaissance. And what happens is curiosity about the rest of the world and a desire for goods from Asia really prompt this age of discovery. So how does this all fit in? Well, for the past month and a half, we've been studying the Renaissance, and that was roughly from 1300 to 1700. Now we're entering this time period known as the Age of Exploration, which actually comes right during the middle of the Renaissance and takes us all the way to really the 1800s. So these periods overlap. Our next unit, when we get back from Christmas break, will be the Age of Reason. Again, also stems from the Renaissance. And then ultimately the Age of Revolution, which takes us up to, really, look at that last number there, 1890, which is the dawn of the 20th century. So these years are getting kind of closer together as we move closer towards modern day. All right, our first block, the causes of exploration. What were the three main causes of exploration? Well, cause number one, gold. Okay, Spain, Portugal, France, Holland, and England were all interested in gold, jewels, spices, and other goods that could stimulate their economy. Make no mistake about it, these countries were interested in not just gold, but riches. So when we say gold, we're actually referring to not just the physical, tangible product that you would buy, but also the idea of each country wanted to become wealthy. And where did they have, where could they find a lot of wealth? Through trade with Asia. The next reason is God. Okay, we talked in the last unit that the Catholic Church was under fire from the Protestant Reformation and the Scientific Revolution. Well, the Catholic Church decided what better way to expand our church and build our church than to send missions overseas. So during this time period, we're going to see an expansion of Christianity into the Western Hemisphere. And then finally, the third motive for exploration is glory. Explorers sought new land, new wealth, and adventure in traveling around the world. Exploration is always neat. We always remember the first men to accomplish things. For example, the first man to walk on the moon, Neil Armstrong. Does anyone remember the name of the, fourth, fifth, or sixth guy that walked on the moon? No, because they're not as famous. They didn't achieve as much glory. Does anyone remember the second guy that crossed the Atlantic? We know of Columbus, but we don't know the other guy. How about the first guy to fly solo across the Atlantic in an airplane? That was Charles Lindbergh. Does anyone remember the second guy? Probably not. So that idea of glory really comes into play. So as we're going through this unit, really remember the idea of God, gold, and glory as the three G's of exploration. Our early explorer, I say Marco, you say Polo. Marco Polo was an Italian explorer who traveled from Venice to Italy to Mongolia and China, and he brings back lots of Chinese culture and food and even art to Italy. And when he comes back, he's going to trigger the demand for Asian spices. And you guys can see Marco Polo, this wasn't, a day trip or a week trip. He was gone for years at a time. He would leave Venice, travel through the Mediterranean in some instances, travel through the Middle East and Jerusalem, through those ancient trade marts, move through what's now modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, now Pakistan, through mountains of Pakistan and India, and then Mongolia, and then Nepal, and then what's now modern-day China, coming back down around across the South China Sea, through India, and then back through. So you guys can see he made several famous voyages, but his explorations really brought back a demand for goods from Asia. So this is going to be one of the reasons why. But again, take a look at the map, the topography of the map. There's lots of mountains and deserts. It's a very long process to get from Venice all the way to Beijing. Very long process. So what we're going to see with the other explorers is that they're going to try and find a quicker way to get to this area of the world. All right, the search for spices. Okay, the reason number one why spices were important was they were used to preserve food. Okay, there was no modern refrigeration, so spices were very, very important during this time. Second reason was they added flavor to salted meats. So think about it. If you have something that's very, very salty, usually doesn't taste very good. So you add that salt to meat. And then the third reason was that during the scientific revolution, medicines, spices were used to actually cure, or they were used in place of medicines. All right, some of the new technologies, and this is one of the early globes of the world. You guys can see here is Europe. Here's what we think is Africa and Asia. Okay, but this is all that the Europeans know at this point. Okay, then as exploration continues to travel, we get a better definition of what Africa looked like, as well as the coast of Latin America and South America, but still the rest of the Americas are all unexplored. And here's, again, another tile showing Europe, Africa, Middle East, parts of Asia, parts of China. Again, not really understanding the whole concept of the Earth being a globe incomplete. It's missing the whole other side of the hemisphere. So some of the new technologies we're going to talk about. 4 things in particular. Cartographers became very prevalent during this time period, and a cartographer is simply someone who makes and perfects a map. So we're going to see advancements in maps and charts. The astrolabe is used, and this is an instrument that is used to determine one's latitude while you are at sea. And ultimately, there is the caravel. And the caravel is a new type of sailing vessel which has triangular and square sails, which made it easier to sail into the wind. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a second. Here's a visual aid. Here's the Hartmann astrolabe fit from 1532, a mariner's compass, better maps, and even a sextant. And they were all used to measure stars and create basically your global positioning satellite. That's what that was. You're looking at a Renaissance GPS. Here is a picture of a caravel. This could have been very easily one of Columbus's sails, because you have to figure when you're sailing westward, you're sailing against the trade wind. So if you're on a sailboat, it's kind of hard to sail against the wind. But these new triangular sails catch the wind and make the ship much more effective and efficient for sailing into the wind and thus traveling around the world. All right, the first country to lead the way is Portugal. Okay, why Portugal? Well, take a look at its geography. Portugal is located right there on the coast, so it has access to all of the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, Italy, we remember, was the center of the Renaissance and trade, so it had access here. So as goods from the Middle East were being shipped to Italy and then later to Spain and Portugal, they were getting marked up. So Spain and Portugal were actually getting ripped off from Italy. So they said, well, you know what? I think it's a little bit easier if we take the initiative and find a quicker way to get to the Middle East ourselves. So Portugal leads the way. Henry the Navigator, Prince Henry the Navigator, is the 3rd son of the King of Spain. Henry is not a sailor or an explorer, but what he does is, with all his money, he opens up a school of exploration. And together he brings together map makers, mathematicians, and astronomers to study navigation. He also has enough money to sponsor voyages westward into the Atlantic Ocean and southward down Africa's coast. So I would compare him to the Medici family. The Medicis, as we remember from our unit on the Renaissance, the Medicis gave money and financed the arts and made the Renaissance possible. Henry the Navigator financed these trips of great expedition and exploration along the Atlantic and the west coast of Africa, thus giving Portugal the lead in exploration. All right, that's where I'm going to hold up for our first flip classroom. You guys should have down your entire first page of notes, which is causes of exploration, the early explorers, the search for spices, new technologies, and Portugal leading the way. If I went too fast and you need to view this video again, please do so, and be prepared to discuss this with me in class.